Now hold on. No way any of this could be true.
Meanwhile,
What is the Shadowheart series about? A friend asked me this question recently, and I froze for quite a bit. I realized I did not have an answer. This shocked him. After a little while, I gave an answer that I can't entirely remember, so it could not have been that great. That interaction is now stuck in my memory. Why I can't fully explain? Perhaps it's to do with being disarmed by such a simple question. Or maybe how I think about games needs to change, or at least pivot. By the time this review is over, hopefully I will have an answer for you. Until then, let me walk you through a divisive game that tried its hardest to impress me. Before we start though, I need to put something on the table. Shadowhearts from the New World had a troubled development. Nautilus, formerly known as Saknoth, was acquired by Aruze. Aruze was not a good company to work with or for. They don't exist anymore, technically, absorbing Universal Entertainment, not that one, and assuming the name. But we'll just stick to Aruze for this story. Before everything happened with Nautilus, they bought out SNK, developers of King of Fighters, Metal Slug, so many games, with the intent of using their characters for pachinko machines. Before the ink dried on the documents, Aruze liquidated the studio. Most of the devs left and eventually managed to get back on their feet, thankfully, successfully suing them for 5.6 billion yen. So when I tell you that Nautilus had difficulties making this game, I hope you understand I don't blame the devs for any obvious shortcomings I think From the New World suffers from. To finish a game in what I believe is less than a year, having the game director change midway through, to, according to interviews, have the game be 60% done 3 months before its release, is utter madness. For a game of this quality to come out the other end, despite the hurdles, speaks volumes to the skill of the developers. They have my respect. All that stuff out the way, let's get messy. Johnny Garland, a private detective and cat locator extraordinaire, was involved in a major car accident with his sister. He lost his memories of a chunk of his life. He started this agency to hopefully find a lead on what happened. This leads him to be hired by a vaguely evil guy, just a smidge of malice.
Let's just say we have a business relationship.
He asks Johnny to find someone in New York. A tip quickly leads him to the local abandoned opera house, where he finds his man in a scene right out of a horror flick.
Who's there? What? My God! You're Johnny! Wait, stop right there! Don't come any closer!
What are you acting all scared about?
Yeah.
It's not like I'm going to report you or anything.
Awakening back in his office, Shania and Natan introduce themselves.
I am Nathan.
Johnny decides to let the partially suspicious man know the fate of his missing person. Shania decides to follow Johnny to maybe learn about anyone who has knowledge of malice. During this, on the other side of town, someone runs into the police, known as Killer. He looks to be on his last legs until a mysterious lady shows up and breathes new life into him. And that's it. It's a very brief setup this time. While the game tries to tie in these two events later to middling success, the greatest strength is to have a reason to have a road trip around the good old US of A. Because this game is dumb, in parentheses positive.
Okay, folks. I strongly suggest you all stand back. There! Behold, ninjutsu's out of unlock.
First off, this takes place in the Roaring Twenties, which I don't know too much about, other than Prohibition, Al Capone, surface level stuff. It's not my country. Not many RPGs or even games take place in this setting, and in reality it is just a cool setting to let us soak in. There's definitely anachronistic elements. Nobody expects Shadow Hearts to play it straight. Lovecraft is working for Arkham University after all. From the gangsters in Chicago to the aliens of Roswell, heading south to bask in the glory of Chichen Itza, it is hard if you're willing to look. And if there's one place I can easily show my feelings about this game, it would be the graphics and presentation. We are at the twilight years of the PS2, so Shadow Hearts is pumping out some nice textures. Compare Yuri's face to Johnny's. The higher detail helps the game have a different feel, much more of a vibrant, even overexposed at times art style. It's a little jaggy for sure. It does come with a filter option that smears the frame, which means Blur City. I left it off because I do prefer the default. There were scenes that actually got me taking a second to soak it all in. Vilcabamba, the Caribbean, this fucking unreal detailed sewer. What? The odd graphical problem here and there is a nothing burger. Every game has an imperfect angle if you look long enough. It's clear in this case, however, that time was a constant obstacle. Carpets appear unrendered, ruins are muddy. It's just not up to par with the rest of itself, which sucks. This leads me to an awkward question. Was it choice or consequence to let it look in this sharp? We might never know. It's the same story for the monster design. The previous games used a mix of Asian horror with a dash of H.P. Lovecraft. Now we have a whole new continent to explore. Everything fits the dungeon they inhabit. Also, I don't really have anywhere else to put this. We now have start of battle lines.
Alright, let's do this.
Proper boss intros. And head tracking, which leads to some funny looks at time. I have a generally good opinion about all these, though once the windows get involved, it's a coin flip. Is it gonna look horrendous? Or goofy? Unspeakable horror? Or a swirly face? I'm sure some of these might speak to you, and that's cool. Me? The only thing I ever feared was those baby mounds. And they're never returning. No wait, that was a joke. Please. I beg you, not again! Oh, that's a mood. How much blood do you think he has? Oh, not a lot of blood.
Kaboom!
Yes. It looks like we're right on time.
Mao, thanks a lot, buddy. I owe you one.
So yeah, there's no getting past that our party members have gone off the deep end. Joachim was my favorite character in Covenant. A vampire wrestler by day, superhero by night. Eccentric in his own right.
No evildoer can stand against my rippling muscles.
He fit right in with the cast, grounded by the fantastical elements of the people he shared space with.
Jeez, don't be such a wuss. Go and make your move. You can do it. Go. Kiss her. Kiss her. Grab. Huh?
Pan over to the New World and we have like 3 Joachims, and only one of them is related to him. When the mariachi with the guitar / flamethrower / missile battery is one of the tame characters, you know you're in for a good time. Oh, you were expecting me to bash them? Well, there is plenty to bash. As characters go, they're as shallow as a pamphlet. A cat that knows Drunken Fist, wants to be an actress. That's really it. In concept though, I love it a bit.
I might be able to help you. Perhaps we can make a little deal.
It's a style we don't get to see in video games, or more specifically, JRPGs. How about Gun Kata? It's enough for me to ignore the depth, in terms of them being characters at least. Even if we have to sidestep Hilda's calorie meter, I'm not going into it, someone else can. The small thing I've noticed is the regular talkie scenes tend to have more interesting camera angles. Not all the time. It creeps in more and more. Let's use Natan as an example.
I am Nathan.
He has a side quest involving basically cryptids. In the final hunt, that's an involved standalone dungeon, it plays with a POV, shifting to shots that look like he's being watched. It's a minor point, but it's an improvement and a lovely touch regardless. It is such a weird experience to be sitting there, ping-ponging between game good and game evil, trying to grasp at a constant, just for the game to sit me down, smile, and tell me to be quiet for just a moment. I have multiple complaints about the whole experience, with the exception of the OST. Yoshitaka Hiroda returns as what appears to be the only composer this time. Working with other musicians takes time. We don't have time. Time is money. Make game. Earn money, peasants. Hiya! And I gotta be honest, I think it's really good. Good from the outset too, which is always a plus. New York has this mellow lead up. The cautious entrance to a place unfamiliar. Until you remember you're Johnny fucking Garland. These are your streets. And if anyone tries any funny business, Lenny has you back. Chicago, however, is dangerous. A hotbed of crime during Prohibition. The soul of jazz struggling to pull the wool over everyone's eyes, hiding the everyday violence. When we do meet Al Capone in From the New World, he looks all business in his character model, sort of mean, rugged, though his in-game portrait shows him to be quite the teddy bear. Now, imagine having to break this bad boy out of Alkatraz. An act of subterfuge that went perfectly for a whole minute. Windows creating horrid beasts disrupt your every plan. Locked in the same building as the now cowering cowards, you fester in regret. This is now a prison of your own making. Or just to have the confidence to cut it all entirely. An endgame dungeon required for a different ending is devoid of all music, leaving you to soak up all the destruction that happened here. There are games that release today that do not understand the power of some quiet time. You know, until... The only issue I really have is the same one that repeats over and over again. Time. Did this town really mean to share music with a dungeon? Why, oh why, is the final area so low in the mix? God, it makes me mad. It infuriates me. I understand it's business, that this is an industry that makes money. I'm not naive, I understand. But how critical was the release date to where we can't delay it for like 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 days? The difference it could have made. And we don't live in that timeline, we exist here and now, which means I have to talk about combat. For me to praise yet another aspect of a flaw. Wait, we can't do the screenshot gag right after that. We did that last episode. What the hell is wrong with—
And we're back to our regularly scheduled Judgment Ring. On today's show, 10 ways to spice up your combo life.
Quite a bit has stayed the same, so I won't go over all of it again, just the notable bits. The ring itself has gotten bigger. It was a real jump scare the first time I showed up. Also, on the gameplay side, it might be correcting near misses. Here's some proof. I'm not gonna complain. It's hardly generous enough to move the skill needed to earn strikes, just improving the overall game feel. Fusions are still here, but now they're sexy fusions. Strangely titillating, I know. Just remember to turn it off in the options. There's only so many times I can be aroused before the tedium kicks in. And that wraps up this segment. Tune in next time to discover the secrets of the Psycho Sigil system. Now we can get into the real change, the brand new combo system. The way the combos function differently here is very important to the flow of combat. Covenant needed you to physically touch another party member to get the party started, giving you the decision of, do I spend a turn supporting the party, or can I fit in a devastating combo? While very simple, the actual physical space of a battle allowed for shortcuts to this process, which is a really cool discovery to make. At some point, I somehow managed to get a 5-person combo because they just happened to bump into each other the right way. No longer do you need to touch tips to end enemies, everything is tied to the stock gauges. Every character has a bar that will fill over the course of battles, up to 2 stocks. And this is where the fun begins. For a single stock gauge, a combatant has the choice of doing a double action, meaning they can mix and match attacks, magic, or items in a single turn, or combo with anyone on the team regardless of their turn position, with the drawback of still using an upcoming turn to perform this. Nevertheless, the freedom this provides is amazing. All the receiving member needs is their own stock, and the combo keeps going. Did I mention you could do double combo actions? Oh, I didn't? Oh. you can do that.
Take that.
And makes any scenario where they fight alone more interesting by a default. The amount of close calls I had that were reversed by a Hail Mary double turn is a lot. More than 2. But don't think that all these shiny mechanics are just yours to play with. Enemies have the same tools as you do. Failing to keep tabs on the monster's resources might bite you in the ass when they roll up with their own combos. Hence, both sides have moves to attack this bar directly. For 50% stock, you can do a hard hit, damaging the enemy's gauge, or for just a little MP cost, spells can accomplish this for you. Just remember that these can't be comboed off of. Alright, direct hit. That's a rework system. Back in Covenant, you could choose what type of attack you wanted to do, physical attacks. Knock up, knock down, knock back, normal. They had a small use in being able to do a little bit of damage, or to manipulate their state, but generally, you were better off never interacting with it, since the temperamental status of the attacks was a problem. But in From the New World, everything has been quantified. Enemies can now only exist in 3 states: ground, neutral, above. And if one of your attacks do not have one of those properties, it will miss, guaranteed. Won't even let you. Well, it will let you. It will show red to let you know that this is going to fail. You can still do it. All in all, it just means that you need to have a variety of attacks to keep combos going. It does also make physical attackers slightly more interesting. Knocking an enemy up from the ground will do extra damage and an extra hit. Same in reverse. At least if you don't have any MP or special attacks, you can still juggle them up, down for some extra damage. It's very nice. And what they also did is tied stock gauge into the new battle rewards. It might be one of the smartest decisions they've made with the new system. In Shadow Hearts, the series, optimal play was already incentivized with the very concept of a judgment ring, a zone dedicated to making things more effective. Covenant upped the ante with bonuses from performing well in the actual battle system itself, giving small but welcome rewards to the player, like a friendly pat on the back. From the New World took all this and turbocharged it, giving you stock gauge as a new bonus. A reward like that should push the player into spending their stock gauges more liberally, which feeds back into itself by rewarding more stock gauge, triggering a positive feedback loop. When it bothers to reward you, that is. In some dungeons, no matter how well you perform, it goes back to the old reliable extra cash, XP, or items. It's not random. Some fights just don't have that as an option, which really stings. Once or twice, it even teases you with a 5% bonus. Wow, how generous. Like, do you want me to play optimally or not? Because everything is way beefier compared to Covenant, meaning that sting is now a full-blown uppercut. And then we get to the actual annoying stuff. A few times during boss fights, something felt off. Like, no matter how well I played, the boss would sneak in something that would disrupt my plans. At first, I could not understand how this was happening, but during a boss fight at the 10-hour mark, I caught the game red-handed. The boss's attacks have special properties that allow them to jump the turn order. This thing up here? Worthless. It's not even them doing unique attacks to move them forward. That I would be okay with. Miffed for sure, but I could live with it. No, it's the same attacks I can do, but now rather than it delaying my turns, it pushes them forward? And the funniest part about this whole thing, if you let the boss complete a double attack, everything is the same as it ever was, leading to 2 scenarios: death by 1,000 cuts, or nuclear bomb. I can see why they have this property. The player has a huge control over the turn and stock economy. Under optimal conditions, having a possible 11 turns to a boss is 1. But honestly, I would have been okay with them also being sponges. I'm so afraid of them to the point it causes very passive play. I'm not going to combo early when it will leave me stuck with such an action deficit afterwards. The boss will rip me to shreds. So both parties are stuck in this limbo state of bog standard jrpg combat, mitigating the boss's bullshit and hoping nothing goes wrong. Ruminating on this situation, if I was given time, albeit a short amount, maybe like, I don't know, a week, to find a solution, I would have added a intention mechanic. I think it would have fit the system we currently have pretty nicely. Something like Grandia's system. Won't have stopped the bullshit though. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we Shin Megami Tensei now? Don't have 4 accessories to prevent this. Go directly to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect lottery ticket. I have a funny feeling this is exactly where I stopped playing the game about 10 years ago. And it honestly makes me mad. And like, not fake mad like I was earlier, like genuinely a little seething. To have a system that speeds up combat while keeping in strategy, where complacency will make your attacks fail, to push you towards some sort of mastery, only for parts to gnash and grind against itself, instead randomly punishing you with enemies you have no hope of one-shotting. For them to drain your resources, repeating the cycle. And once you get past all this nonsense, it turns out the bosses have been playing Jenga. You'd think with the combat being way harsher that the tone would follow. Surprisingly, this is not a serious adventure despite what the game tries to imply. We've gone from a 16 to a 12 PEGI rating, in Europe at least. Despite the, transformations, it's still teen in the US, which really shocked me. Boober is usually a spark for concern, and that's reflected in the tone. Whenever a bad guy needs to isekai someone, they just wave their hands at them like a Power Ranger villain. Killer is never shown to, like, kill anyone? Actually, someone does perform a murder, and he's not even in the main cast of villains. McManus lives up to a crime boss, short-tempered, violent. He could have been a real threat if he stuck around. His end was satisfying, don't get me wrong. Just that he was a threat to Rita Repulsa's grand plan, and had to die! Even Ness, a detective who gets set up as a character to pay attention to, a background element to complicate things, gets reduced to a minor side quest for a Wall Street-themed porno mag. Look, all I'm saying is, the elements for a darker tone would lay there, just not expanded on. So, I've talked about the story of games before. I don't think it's my strong suit. These days I focus on the ideas that I find interesting to explore, and I enjoy doing that. However, the new world presents me with an opportunity to talk about some storytelling concepts. Here's a question for you. If the heroes encounter a villain and win a battle, what should happen next? Considering the tone aside, of course. This should represent a victory for the good side, or at least a setback for the losers. Using the previous games as an example, a third party could swoop in and take advantage of the situation. The villains might pull something desperate that forces a hard decision on the heroes. Or perhaps the bad guys just lose a core member. Regardless of what happens, it should push the story forward in a meaningful way, or at least characterize people, in my opinion. Now that I've touched on that, here's the story setup for the second half of the game. The villains want to open 3 gates to store the malice of the world, scattered all around Mesoamerica. Sort of like Nikolai's plan from Covenant, but the number 3. Doing so will summon the gate. What is the gate? It's like an evil door that's weirdly high-tech. Lady's also high-tech, but that's never really explained. I feel at some point aliens were the bad guy and it was rewrote, but that's a speculation, I have no confirmation. Can't be having that, so Johnny and co chase them to these locations to store malice. Always reacting to the villain's plans and never doing anything proactive. That would be a whatever point if not for the fact that we catch them inside these ruins. We fight. We win the battle. But actually lose the fight. Bullshit loss aside, this one at least pretends to set up something. This repeats on itself 2 more times, no matter if we win or lose, until all the ruins are activated. Oh no, this must be bad. Well, you see the gate appears, but now it has to be charged. Thankfully, there's a place that contains will, the opposite of malice, that will seal the gates to give the heroes more time to figure out everyone's backstory. This leads to the most, because the plot needs to happen moment I've seen in a while. Killer somehow makes it to all the dungeon's puzzles in record time to confront us. Seconds before we activate the Well of Will. A boss fight ensues, and after we defeat him, he lies on the ground, still alive. And you know what everyone does? We all turn around show our backs to the man whose entire backstory is his fucking name. No award for figuring out what happens next. And like, what's the point of the game part? No, really, that's a serious question. I know in most games you have to win in order to see the story continue. Challenge, or at least a point of failure, is a valid pillar of game design, yada yada. But this is not a book. I don't beat Graham and Aria of Sorrow just for the game to turn the page and greet me with the text, "Somehow Dracula returned." The gameplay should be a representation of the will, no pun intended, of the characters I'm inhabiting. Myself as the player is changing the course of the story through action. When we disregard my input, my accomplishments, just to continue like the characters were destined to lose, it feels like I'm a passenger in my own story. It's very bizarre, but I understand how we got here. The first half of the game is wacky road trip through America, with the two groups never interacting outside of a third party. We're missing something to bridge the two halves and give more context. Hell, we never get any extra backstory on Johnny and Lady's connection until the game remembers it. No flashbacks or other family members. Which is extra weird for Johnny because... Oh right, spoilers. Look, I'm not sitting here for a whole skip to screen. Just know the reasons why Lady is the way she is will be coming up. Alright? 3, 2, 1. You see, Johnny died. That car crash he talked about in the intro? It claimed his life and his sister, Grace. For 5 years, they were hidden away from society while his father tried to find a way to bring them both back. He eventually gets his hand on everyone's favorite book, the Emigre manuscript. Oh boy, we know how this plays out. Plot twist, it actually worked.
You must continue the spell. The souls, they are not yet fully in place.
Grace.
However, shocked by Grace's revival, he stops the incantation, condemning Johnny to a life of a monster. Grace, understanding the entire situation somehow, it's dramatic, she gets a pass, gives her will to Johnny, reversing their fates. Honestly, we could have done with anything to help us understand who Grace was. Flashbacks or confused nightmares of guilt for Johnny, but we learn all this information in the span of an hour, just before the final dungeon. Oh, and now he can do this, by the way. The game doesn't tell you that, it just shows up. I accidentally clicked it when I wanted to take a photo. Game design! So, who is the main character of this game? I know that's a weird question to ask, but I feel like it's quite important. You want to jump the gun and say it's Johnny. He's on the front of the box after all. However, throughout the game, his backstory might tie into the villains. It does not change anything. Instead, we can see Johnny as the point of view character. And through that lens, that puts Shania in the spotlight. And from here, we can see a story about the cycle of revenge. Someone who had their tribe annihilated, who sought more and more power, choosing violence before even meeting the person responsible, carried by a blind rage that cost them their own will. And in the end, what did it accomplish? An empty heart still devoid of light. The anger festers slowly but surely. It spills on others nearby until we become a beast, carried by a primal urge to make things even, a new monster of malice. Or we can face the pain, to look deep down and reflect, soothe the sorrow and find new allies. It won't change what happened, nothing ever will. We don't need to forgive, we just need to move on, step by step towards something new. Oh, of course the game isn't nearly this clean, and I don't think it's interested in exploring the themes in that way. Hell, the good ending infuriates me.
I'll go with you if you want me to.
Will you stop being so selfish?
Huh?
I'll be going with you. Okay.
That settles that.
Good job, Johnny! You got the woman! Grats! It would have been cliche, but I would have rather an ending where they both go and explore the world. Lanny in the office, missing the master while the people who got their life back, both figuratively and literally, set their sights on a different horizon. From the new world, if you would. Waka waka waka. So, about that answer I promised. What is Shadow Hearts about? I've rewritten this section multiple times, trying to sound deep or poetic, maybe to impart some higher meaning, when in reality all I can keep coming up with is life sucks ass. That's the best I got. Bad things happen constantly to those around you. And what's worse is everyone has their own agenda, trying to help themselves and theirs, creating hurt people. They lash out, repeating the cycle. The amount of harm the Emigre manuscript has inflicted on the people of this world is staggering, just to reverse a shitty hand. Often we retreat back to the safety of known quantities. There's the poetic coming back through again, in case you're wondering. And it's okay to go back to comfort, but by never reaching out and making connections, it's hard to move on. It's worth it though. It'll help you move past the pain and avoid becoming a villain in someone else's story. And with that, I've now played the entire Shadow Hearts series. I knew I wanted to at some point, however an opportunity prevented itself that I had to take. For those not in the know, there was a double Kickstarter for 2 games, spiritual sequels to both Wild Arms and Shadow Hearts. Named Penny Blood, it piqued my interest, involving a lot of Nautilus people. I'm optimistically excited for it. Though doing research for From the New World, I noticed there's some similarities. Both games take place in the USA during the 1920s, in New York, featuring a private detective who was asked to investigate something that turned sour poorly. You know, that's cliche, but that's strange is happening again. We'll see how that turns out. That other game though, Armed Fantasia, is also in my wheelhouse. Maybe after a little detour to get a breath of fresh air, we can dive through the Wild Arms games together. A shining beacon of jrpg dungeon design and western punk aesthetic.